All right, welcome back to episode 3 featuring the Central Division in the NHL recap series of the 2023 season. We're going to start this one off on a low. I'm sorry, folks, but we have to talk about the Arizona Coyotes. I'm here, by the way, with Eric, the guy that's been doing the last few recap videos with me, also another associate on the channel with Joe, who cannot be with us at the moment, neither does he know much about hockey. So let's get into the Arizona Coyotes. Man, I don't know what to say about them. They're just existing. That's about it. I mean, the team sucks. They rely on Clayton Keller. That doesn't mean they play in a college arena. This past season was just a blast through the roof. Like so many teams that were playing in that arena were dominating, and there were literally more fans in that little college 5,000 seater arena than even Coyotes fans were themselves. Now, credit to them. Beautiful cheerleaders. Beautiful cheerleaders. But they can't have this much energy and stuff when they're not winning games. So, obviously, they didn't make the playoffs, but that's not a surprise as well, because they're going to be continuing being on a low. Because no matter what happens on the ice, stuff is going on off the ice, which is even more concerning. Figuring out where they're going to put that arena. So, all in all, it's just a team that needs to attempt to try to focus, and they have a lot of. This is probably the one of the 2 or 3 teams in this whole thing, in the whole league that needs to make a lot of decisions going into next season. Whether it's staff, whether it's their forwards, whether it's defensemen, whether if it's reliable goalies, whether it's where they're actually playing the game. So. We'll see how this goes. We'll turn it over to Eric for his thoughts on the Arizona 2023 season.
Garbage, disappointment. The fact that they had to play in a college stadium should tell you how they are. I mean, there's more Hartford Whalers fans, there's more Atlanta Flames fans at this point. I'm saying the Flames intentionally. Than there are than there are Arizona Coyote fans. I mean, come on. It's pathetic. It's a pathetic showing for a pathetic team that relies heavily on Clayton Keller. You nailed it. So many questions for this team. That's all there really is to say about them. It's a bad season. They're years away from contention, and I don't know if it's going to happen in Arizona.
All right, moving on to the Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago Blackhawks, as you know, this past season lost Patrick Kane. Obviously, Jonathan Toews retiring. Things are separating, and if Chicago doesn't pull it together and acquire some more skill from around the league, they're just going to keep sinking to a lower level. That's honestly really I have all to say. From that point, I mean, the franchise historically is amazing, and I'm not going to brag about the fact that they're an original 6 team, but they have a lot to prove still. And this past season was a showing that if they don't get things together, they're going to start slumping. And I mean, obviously, they've already been slumping with their lack of playoff appearance, but they have to change that if they want to be good. So, what about you, Eric?
Patrick Kane traded, Max Domi traded, Jonathan Toews gone. I mean, their Stanley Cup core, and I know Domi was a part of that, but their Stanley Cup core is gone. You got to move on. You got to embrace the future, and I think they're going to be doing that. Obviously, we know how the 2023 draft went. That's a future discussion, but Chicago was not good, and their standing in the league is definitely not great right now. I mean, their top goal scorer from last year that's returning is Andreas Athanasiou, so that right there should tell you how the team is and what they look like. I'll start off with the Colorado Avalanche now. Colorado, of course, went on to win the Central Division this past season, so there's always positive vibes with that. But they were upset in the playoffs by the second-year team, the Seattle Kraken, losing in the first round to Seattle, and nobody really saw this one coming. I mean, I know Patrick and I both thought, okay, Colorado's going to breeze past whoever they play. But regardless, getting upset in 7, I mean, the only positive for Bruins fans is that Colorado, the number 1 seed in the West, also choked. But regardless, I mean, the team did what you'd expect. McKinnon, Rantanen both took big steps forward. McKinnon in particular, oh my gosh, if he was healthy the full season, he would have had a 50-goal season for sure. Rantanen did have a 50-goal season. Cale Makar had a big step, took another big step. Of course, he was also injured. So, I mean, this team's a talented team. It's just injuries really delayed them, really hurt them. This is a team that's going to make a run in the future. I just think Seattle was ready for them. How do you feel about them?
Yeah, for sure. If McKinnon was 100%, they'd be going flying colors past Seattle. I still thought for sure that Colorado was going to get past Seattle, and things didn't go as planned, and hopefully going into next season they'll be more healthier of a team and they'll make another one. Because I think for sure in the next coming 2 or 3 seasons they could definitely make a run to the Western Final. So. Yeah, like I said, they were kind of plagued with injuries, and then they were kind of a little overexcited about coming in and having to play Seattle in the first round, because a lot of people were thinking that, it was going to be a breeze, and, Seattle made it tough, and Seattle prevailed. So, more to think about for Colorado, which brings us to our next team, which is the Dallas Stars. Now, the Dallas Stars have a decent amount of players. In the last season or two, they have lost some key players that I thought were going to remain in their core. They've had a lot of decisions to make with the team, whether it's the coaching staff or with the players, and I feel like that's kind of created distraction to how far they can go. Now, they didn't do bad in the playoffs. I think there's a lot more that they have to build off of going into next season, judging how this past season went. Because I think they're kind of it's like when they make it into the playoffs, their thought process is, all right, we'll be fine, don't worry about it. And we've seen what's happened in years past where they get shut out in the first round or something, or they don't make it to the West Final, or they don't make it to the Stanley Cup Final. So they did well this past season, but I think I could have seen them going all the way to the Stanley Cup Final. That was not true, but they weren't far from it, obviously. So they have a few things to work on, but I mean, all in all, I think they'll stay a core team, and they'll keep acquiring other players that can keep them sustained in the next few seasons. What about you?
I mean, the big thing for Dallas was the huge, surprising season from their 2 youngsters, in Jason Robertson and Rube Hintz. And I apologize in the background if you hear rain. We are getting a lot of heavy storms here. There's thunder and lightning outside, so in advance, apologies. But Robertson really took the league by storm. I don't think anyone saw him having the season he did where he scored 46 goals, had 109 points. Just completely shocking. But I agree with you with what you said about Dallas. I mean, this is a team that has potential, but they seem to get scatterbrained once they get to the postseason. Still, Dallas, they're a strong team. They almost beat Colorado. They almost took the 1 seed. It would have been pretty surprising, or the 2 seed. It would have been pretty surprising if they did. But unfortunately for them, they just struggled in the playoffs. I'll start off with Minnesota. Minnesota's a team that I know Patrick doesn't have much to say about. But, I mean, this is a team that they have a good mix of old and young. More old players, though. Of course, they have Kirill Kaprizov, who was dominant before getting hurt. His injury clearly hurt the team during the regular season and during the playoffs. But outside of him, I mean, they have a lot of older guys that are taking steps forwards. I do like Joel Eriksson Ek. I'm a fan of his. They have Zuccarello, who's starting to look good again. But, I mean, Minnesota, this is a team that's known for making the playoffs and just being upset in the first couple rounds, first round, second round, whenever. So there's a lot of upside with Minnesota, but they need to get it all together, and they need Kaprizov to stay healthy. That's the big thing for them. How do you feel about them?
Just like you said, not a lot to say. They are, like you could say, like they're just a team of the playoffs. It's like when they get in the playoffs, it's like there's energy in the building, but it's just the team can never impress the fans very much. They can't rely on Kaprizov at all because although he is one of the younger guys compared to, Zuccarello or Dumba and stuff, there's other players that are older that they can't rely on because they're more veteran players. So they have to make moves and they have to get more depth in their offense and defense to continue and get further in the playoffs. Because I think they've been a good team, but they're just They're just everybody's like, okay, I expect them to make playoffs. Yeah, they're going to make the playoffs. Don't worry about it. But can they actually make something out of the playoffs and get to the finals, the conference finals or something? Because the fans are just going to get sick of them playing, and keep getting knocked out in the first round or something. So that goes into the next team, Nashville Predators. I don't really have a lot to say about Nashville either, actually. Duchesne is just not there this season. It's no surprise. Other players, Roman Josi, it's just, I don't know. No player this past season on that team, other than maybe the goalie, have really showed up much. Team, obviously, as we all know, did not make the playoffs. That's not surprising. They have a lot to do, and they're not impressing anybody in the NHL fan base. Nobody's looking, be like, oh, Nashville Predators, they're on a hot streak, It's like, I don't know. There's questions that I think sometimes whether Nashville even should have hockey in their city, because it's just like, besides that one run they had in the I forget if it was 2016 or 2017, where they lost in the Stanley Cup final. It's like they're literally just like the Florida Panthers, where they've had hope, but they never have actually won the cup. So, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, pretty accurate. This isn't the team that we saw back in 2017 that made the Stanley Cup. They're good, but not great. Roman Josi was their top goal scorer, the top point getter, I should say. And that's not good when you have a defender as your top point getter. But you'll see, again, different player, still different type of player. But it's pretty sad. Nashville, this isn't the team that we saw 5 years ago. No one's excited about Nashville. I'm not going and saying, when the Flyers or the Canadiens play Nashville, I'm not saying, oh, this is going to be a tough fought game. You have to fight for every single goal that you get. I'm looking at them and saying, should be able to score a few goals. So, Nashville, they're good, but they missed out on the playoffs for a reason. Next, we have a disappointing team in the St. Louis Blues. The Blues, of course, we all know how they did in the 2019 season, where they pulled off a great miracle run going from last place in January to winning the Stanley Cup, defeating the Boston Bruins in the process. But this is a team that, they just weren't really there. They traded away their captain, Vladimir Tarasenko, arguably the best player arguably the best player in franchise history. I wouldn't say he is, but probably the second best player in franchise history. So Tarasenko, of course, led them to a cup. But outside of him, Jordan Kyrou, we all know who he is, very inconsistent, best player on that team by far right now. The Blues are entering a rebuild, and we saw that this year. They had high hopes, but they just failed to do anything. Pretty sad showing for them, but still, it could have been worse. How do you feel about them?
Yeah, it definitely could have been worse. They have decent players still here and there. They got Robert Thomas, Torrey Krug. They did lose, like you said, Tarasenko, which I think wasn't the smartest idea, because now the team is kind of officially on the downside. You already saw after they had won the cup that things were going to change, and they have. There's some long-term players that they don't have anymore. So to sum it up, yeah, they're definitely on the downside. So this brings us to our last team in the Central Division, which would be the former Atlanta Thrashers, Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg Jets, oh Lord. I'm just going to sum up this team in one word. They're just Jets. That's 3 words, but there's really nothing to say. This past season they were good, but if you compare them to another team in the Pacific that we'll talk about next video, which is the Calgary Flames, and they're the same in the fact that they get the hype up so much, but they never can show it in the postseason on the ice. And they have solid players that they can do that with, but there's just not enough it's just never amusing to the fans in the postseason because they can't do well. So, what about you? Any last thoughts on this?
They're just the Jets. That's the way to put it. They're the Jets. They don't really excite me. I don't look at this team and say I'm terrified of anyone. I know they have Kyle Connor. I know they have Blake Wheeler. Well, they had Blake Wheeler. I know they have Schleifel. But other than that, I mean, none of these guys, they don't have a superstar, and they're good, but they're not good enough to really make a run. That's the problem with how Winnipeg's constructed. They have some good players, but no great player. So, yes, they'll make the playoffs, but they're not going to dazzle once they get in. They're good, not great. They're the Jets.
All right, so that will conclude the Central Division 2023 NHL season recap video of this division. This was the third episode. Last video will be the fourth of the Pacific Division. So stay tuned for that in the next video, and we'll see you in the next video. Comment, like, and subscribe, and thanks for joining me, Eric.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.